Welcome to the Evolution Show. In the previous episode, I asked the question, where are the so-called Tesla killers? I talked to the president and founder of Tesla Club Sweden, Tibor Blomhäll. And today I'm joined again by Tibor. And we take a closer look at the Chinese EV market. Why is China in the lead when it comes to EV adoption? And what about Tesla's EV and battery factory in Shanghai? What does that mean going forward? As always, we appreciate your feedback. Was it good or bad? If you like the show, consider subscribing. Now, let's get going with the conversation. This is the Evolution Show. Welcome to the Evolution Show. I'm your host, Johan Landgren. The Evolution Show is all about addressing some of the biggest challenges and opportunities of our time. In the previous episode, we talked about Tesla and the so-called Tesla killers with Tibor Blomhäll. And now we invited Tibor back again, but today we're going to look at the China EV market. Welcome back, Tibor.
Thank you very much.
For people who don't know you, you're the president and founder of Tesla Club Sweden. And a real EV enthusiast, I would say.
Yeah.
You have had an EV for how many years?
Oh, I think 6 or 7 years now.
Yeah, and you're a frequent writer on Tesla Club Sweden. You've also been to Tesla events several times. Recently I was the Cybertruck, right?
Yep.
Yeah, but today we're going to talk about the China market, the EV market in China and what's going on there. And of course, we start with the Tesla Shanghai factory. What do you think that it means for Tesla and for the EV market to have this huge factory now in China?
Yeah, I mean, few people know that the largest EV market in the world is in China. It's not the United States, it's not Europe. China has the largest amount of electric cars anywhere in the world. So for Tesla to be on that market locally, it's vital. They can't afford to ship cars halfway around the earth and get who know what kind of customs they have to pay to import the cars into China. So being on the local market is vital for them.
Yeah. What do you think about the demand? People are talking now about the huge demand for EVs in China and especially with Tesla. Why do you think the Chinese people are so interested in Tesla's vehicles?
Well, to start with EVs, if you want a car in China, you have to have a license plate. And for petrol cars, there is a limited amount of license plates you can get every year. Especially in the large cities, there is only a limited amount of cars people are allowed to buy if they emit emissions. But for electric cars, there is no such limit. So it's not just the money. You need to have the license plate to be able to buy a car with a combustion engine. But you are free to buy any electric car you want. So for people in large cities in China, that's the biggest drive to get an electric car. It's much easier to get.
Yeah. If you look at the overall market, most people, they don't know about, including me, I knew a few of the Chinese manufacturers. Maybe you can guide us, tell us a little bit about some of the manufacturers you have in China,
yes,
EVs. Some
of the manufacturers, because there are literally dozens of manufacturers of electric cars in China. Car companies that you have never heard about. And if we look at these top 10 electric vehicle manufacturers, these are the top 10 electric manufacturers in the world. Not China, in the world. And Tesla is well known, yeah. But BYD, BAIC, SAIC, nobody heard about them outside of China. Nobody have bought a car from them outside of China. Yet there are producing much more electric cars than well-known brands as BMW, Volkswagen, and Nissan. So the Chinese market is so huge that they have domestic brands that never get outside of the country, that produce lots of cars. And every single month they are releasing at least 1 or 2 new electric cars. And as I told you, they have dozens of different companies, some of them large, like BYD, some of them quite small for just one city. But a Chinese city is also 100 million people, so they have the base, the customer base.
Yeah. Why do you think you have mentioned it already, I think, but to elaborate a little bit on that, why do you think the Chinese market has become so big? Is it the subsidies? Is it because of environmental reasons? Is it a combination? What's the push? Why do you think they have this huge market for EVs right now?
Yeah, for the government, it's clearly the environment, because we are talking about the environment here in Europe and in Sweden. But I mean, come on, that's nothing compared to a Chinese city, when you can't really see more than a couple of 100 meters because of all the smog, and there is so much pollution in the air, so that you have difficulty breathing. Then you really consider switching to electric cars.
Yeah. Of these Chinese manufacturers, BYD is well known. I know that they have buses, for example, in Europe. They also have cars. Which of the manufacturers, of the Chinese manufacturers, are selling most, or coming, or will sell new vehicles in Europe, for example?
It's two different categories, because we have huge car manufacturers in China who doesn't really want or need to come to Europe, because they have a huge market that's one single country. They don't have to have all these regulations for each different European country, etc. So it's really the smaller manufacturers that are looking at getting to Europe and sell electric cars, not only in China but also in Europe.
Okay. And BYD, of course, has been well known because Warren Buffett, one of the richest people, is heavily invested in BYD. And they are producing a lot of buses. We'll come back to that. Yep. But let's look a little bit closer then on some of the vehicles.
Yeah. Here you see the BAIC EU5. I'm sure it's much easier to pronounce in Chinese. This is the most sold electric car in China last year. And it's about 50 kilowatt hours batteries and about 400 kilometers range, but they have very forgiving range calculations in China. Mm-hmm. And it cost about $23,000-ish after incentives. And
in China, if
you buy it in China. Mm-hmm. The incentives is a jungle. Mm-hmm. It's different incentives in different cities, so it's really hard to really know how much an electric car costs in China.
And you mentioned if you live in a big city, it's basically you can go everywhere if you have an EV.
Yeah.
You have these kind of green registration plates, right? I think I've seen some pictures of people.
Might be, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. Okay, but there are other manufacturers. This is also a SUV or a crossover.
Yes, this is the BYD Yuan S2. That's the second most best-selling car, electric car in China. Mm-hmm. And it's about the same, 53 kilowatt hours battery, 400 kilometer range, and about $21,000 equivalent in price.
Yeah, the price is really attractive. I can understand that if people would have that kind of price for this kind of vehicle in Sweden, a lot of people, a much bigger consumer base would be able to buy it. Mm-hmm. So here's a little bit on of the interior. Yeah, it looks really fresh and modern. It's nothing more to say.
I mean, the Chinese car manufacturers overall, not just electric cars, but Chinese car manufacturers has evolved immensely during the last 10 years. 10 years ago, their car were laughable. Nobody laughs today.
No.
It's the same journey that the Japanese made many years ago, and then the Koreans made the same journey with starting really basic cars and then perfecting the manufacturing of cars. And now it's the Chinese has reached this level that they are producing really good cars.
And here's another funny
Yeah,
thing.
this little car is called the ORA R1. This is the cheapest car in China, or I think in the world. It was the cheapest car last year. It has 33 kilowatt-hour batteries, about 200 kilometers range. The top speed is not very good, about 110, 120 kilometers per hour, but it costs $16,000. And that's before incentives.
Interesting. Yeah, it looks like a really good, city car.
It's a small city car.
Yeah, you don't have to have top speed then. It's top speed in a city was that 20 kilometers or something.
And I think you can guess the customer base they want to reach.
Yeah, young people and interesting. Yeah, this is a quite big car. It looks quite big.
This car is quite big, and this picture was taken in Sweden. This is the AI-Waze U5. This is the first Chinese electric car manufacturer who really wants to get to Europe and sell their cars in Europe. So what they did was they started in China, and then they drove 2 of their cars to Europe. They drove all the way through Russia, and they came to Sweden and Norway, Germany. They traveled around and showed their cars to European customers. And this is a slightly bigger car, and it has 65 kilowatt-hour batteries, about 500 kilometers range. And it will cost about 40,000 euros.
Okay.
Imported in here to Europe.
Interesting. That's actually comparable to the Model. Actually, I think it will be cheaper than the Model Y, at least as it looks now. So that might be interesting to see. And it's coming this year, or is it?
It's supposed to come this year. Yes.
Yeah, that's going to be something to watch out for.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, but we'll come back a little bit to BYD. They are making several cars. I think they have at least 2 in the top 20 or something.
Yeah, several electric cars. They have some plug-in hybrids, and they have buses.
Yes, and I know you've written several articles, very interesting articles about this. Is it in Shenzhen? That's something like that?
Yeah, the city of Shenzhen replaced all their buses with electric buses, and that's 14,000 buses they have replaced with electric buses 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So now all their the buses there are fully electric, and then several other Chinese cities has made the same move, but this is the largest fleet by far in the world.
Yeah, and for the Swedish audience, or for the European audience for that matter, Volvo Trucks just came out, Volvo buses, that they will have, wasn't 300-400 buses or something to Gothenburg delivered this year, next year. And that was the biggest European order this year.
For Volvo.
For Volvo, yes. So, I mean, BYD, it's orders of magnitude bigger.
I mean, BYD, I think they manufactured about 50,000 buses so far, electric buses.
Yeah. And there are actually buses here in Europe since several years back. I know in Denmark, I wrote about this a couple of years ago. But this is in Sweden.
Yeah. This is something that very few people know about. That last year, 20% of the buses sold in Sweden were electric, fully electric. So now we have cities that have completely changed their bus fleet to electric buses. Well, okay, we are not talking about 14,000 buses, and the cities are much smaller. It's like Nyköping, Katrineholm, Lidköping, Norrtälje. Small cities that have switched all their local city buses to fully electric buses. Many of them from BYD or from Volvo and other European manufacturers. And BYD actually has a bus factory in Europe. They have a bus factory in Komárom in Hungary, where they manufacture electric buses made in Europe.
So if you look next couple of years, do you expect to see a lot of electric EVs coming from China to the European and even the US market?
Yeah, I mean, it's the bus company called Nobina who imported these buses, and they were completely blown away by the bus's reliability.
And that's interesting.
They quote some months where they had no bus rides that they had to be cancelled because of engine problems, etc. So I think the uptime with the buses is 99.99%. And that's something completely different than those old diesel buses that could break down or have problems.
I know that another manufacturer in Sweden, I'm not sure, so I won't say if it's Hybricon, the Swedish bus EV maker, or if it was someone else. But in the northern part, I think it was Skellefteå, they had issues because of the winter and so on, keeping the heat in the cabin. They haven't had any problems, as you know, about this with the BYD, and that's very impressive. Yeah. That's good to hear, but also kind of a criticism for the others that say that you can't have electric buses.
And also the ride is much more smoother. So if you are a customer who wants to take a bus ride, you will notice that something is different. The bus is not shaking. It's not engine noises. It's a much more quiet ride.
Yeah, this is a clear signals, I think, for the other manufacturers now to learn from China, obviously. Yeah. So and that's kind of my question for you as well, as a final question. What should we learn? What should we take with us, both kind of the negatives and the positives from China, that we could perhaps apply both here in Sweden and in the rest of the world when it comes to EVs?
Well, one thing that strikes me that yes, they have some monetary helps for you to buy an electric car in China. You have subsidies, but really the thing that pushes folk is that it's difficult to get a license plate for a car with an engine, a combustion engine. So it's much easier for the Chinese government to regulate how many electric cars are we going to sell next year, how to regulate down the number of combustion cars. So they have much more tools than just monetary systems.
Yeah. And what about, so you think it's kind of part of this is push from the governments and so on. But in terms of technology, do you think that it should be more open, that we have access more to, for example, BYD? So it's easier to I mean, if you think about Sweden, it's hard to avoid that we have, Volvo and Scania kind of supporting them and so on. But perhaps we should be more open now to realize that there are others as well that actually can do just as well, and by them, let the different cities, as you mentioned, the small cities, make it easy for them to choose,
Yeah. I mean, I am a bit concerned about Volvo having a press release about a test installation of electric cars. I mean, come on, it's 2020 now. You don't test electric buses anymore. You should have manufactured them many years ago. And other companies are already manufactured 50,000 of them, and you are still testing. you are missing the train
Yeah.
or the bus.
Yeah. Yeah, China is something I will come back to, obviously, and I think it's a big market, but they have both the technology now, I think, and kind of the regulations and the push that we will see. Also talk a little bit about for a smaller country in Norway in the next episode. Something you would like to add that we haven't mentioned, or something?
Actually, one more thing we can talk about China is that plug-in hybrids are dead in China. Nobody wants plug-in hybrids, and nobody wants hybrids, which is a huge problem for Toyota right now, because Toyota's environmental friendly cars are just hybrids, not even plug-in hybrids. But in China, if you have a combustion engine, you have problem getting the license plate. So that's why hybrid cars and combustion engine plug-in hybrid cars are not selling at all in China. It's either a combustion engine or fully electric.
Yeah, really interesting, and I think a good point for the people who are promoting the hybrid, that the hybrid is kind of coming back. I don't think that at all. I think China shows that clear. Again, Tibor, very interesting to hear your input. I hope to see you in the next episode.
I hope to.
Yeah. If you appreciated this episode, just as I did, always appreciate your feedback. Was it good or bad? In the next episode, I'll be back again with Tibor, and then we're going to look closer at on Norway and Sweden. Compare those countries and why Norway is in the lead on a per capita basis. What can we learn from Norway, the EV leader in the world? And as always, if you want to see the videos as soon as they come out, consider subscribing. I hope to see you in the next week.